Day. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our National Girls Collaborative Project webinar, Girls in STEM, a database tale of confidence and satisfaction. I'm so thrilled that you are joining us across many different time zones for this really important webinar where we will be hearing about some really important international research on girls in STEM, confidence and satisfaction. We're joined by some excellent speakers from GenderScan who will be introducing themselves in just a few moments. But I want to go over a few quick housekeeping details. My name is Amanda. I manage our national webinars here at the National Girls Collaborative Project. This webinar is being recorded and everyone will have access to the slides, the recording, as well as the chat transcript. We'll be sharing actually a lot of great resources and links in the chat. And you're encouraged to chat away, ask questions in the chat or Q&A. We'll have some time set aside toward the end of the webinar for asking your questions to the panelist speakers. So let me go ahead and jump in case some of you are new to the National Girls Collaborative Project, and perhaps you're joining us for the very first time today. I wanted to give you a little bit of background before I go ahead and introduce our speakers. So you can see our vision on screen here. National Girls Collaborative Project is a national network of diverse stakeholders who are advancing the agenda of gender equity. We bring together organizations that are committed to informing and encouraging girls to consider STEM. As a network of networks, our reach is broad. The programs in our network serve 20 million girls. And because many of our programs also serve boys, we reach more than 12 million boys as well. NGCP has been transforming STEM for 20 years, and our vision at the heart of it is quite simple. We aim to create STEM experiences that are as diverse as the world we live in. We want to create change, and to do that, we empower providers, educators, leaders, and youth themselves. Here are our 3 essential goals at NGCP. We believe that STEM skills can be acquired by anyone and fostered in everyone. Our initiatives build confidence and create a community of lifelong STEM activators. Through the power of collaboration, we spark curiosity and develop a passion for STEM. We share resources and solutions with a coalition of leaders, and also via our website, newsletters, online databases, social media, and webinars like this one. We strengthen the capacity of programs by sharing exemplary practices, research, and program models. When programs are stronger and more sustainable, girls and youth are better served. We distribute these resources in accessible ways, such as Train the Trainer programs and online platforms. And finally, we leverage our network of girls-serving STEM programs, advocates, and youth, so that together we can create the tipping point for gender equity in STEM. Here are just a few of the many activities NGCP is involved with. In case you're new to us, I want to share a little bit about a few of these activities. And as I'm doing so, my colleague from NGCP, Brenda, will be sharing links to you in the chat in case you're interested in checking out any of the associated resources. So we engage in activities both in person nationally as well as virtually and through our local collaboratives. NGCP partners with organizations to scale and deliver content, such as the Leap into Science National Network in partnership with the Franklin Institute, and the Million Girl Moonshot in partnership with STEM Next and the Mott After School State Networks, serving hundreds of educators via local networks. Working with Lida Hill Philanthropies, NGCP manages the If Then Collection, a digital library housing photos, videos, and other media of women in STEM fields. These media are available for use at no cost, so definitely check out that link as we're putting it in the chat. We also host a youth advisory board that helps review and provide feedback on current NGCP initiatives and projects. And really, they are a guiding voice in the future direction of what we do at NGCP. Fab Femmes, that's another great resource. Please check out that link as we're putting it in the chat. It's an international database of female role models from many STEM fields. They're passionate about the work they do, and they're ready to connect with programs to spark girls' interests. Locally, state collaborative leadership teams offer convenings, providing professional development, mini grants for innovative projects when funding is available, as well as they distribute their own regular newsletters that spotlight local resources. I think you probably know about our national webinars because you found this one. Actually, I should say international webinars, since this one and some of our other webinars are reaching an international audience and brings in great international speakers as well. But we offer them monthly on a variety of topics. So please check out that link if you're interested in joining any of our upcoming webinars. We have a couple of great ones coming up later on this spring. And lastly, don't hesitate to sign up for our NGCP newsletter. We'll pop that link in the chat as well. This is the way you can be the first to hear about events like this one, resources, new things that we have up online. So it's really a great way to stay connected to the work that we're doing here. And now, why we're all here today is to hear from these excellent speakers who are talking about this topic of girls in STEM and what the latest data and research that they've been collecting says about the state of the field of engaging girls in STEM, building confidence and satisfaction in STEM fields. I'm really thrilled about the speakers that we have today. And I believe that Jennifer is having some technical difficulties connecting. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I will go ahead and introduce Claudine and Victoria of GenderScan. Claudine Schmook is the Managing Director of Global Contact, which provides management consulting services to CEOs and decision makers on innovation and gender balance in STEM. In 2008, she launched the GenderScan Global Survey on Women in STEM, which now involves 200 partners representing an audience of 3.5 million people in the world. She's also an expert working with the European Commission. She's previously held senior positions in the media and IT sector and taught ICT for 10 years. She has at the master's and doctorate level. She is also the author of The Successful Women in STEM Disciplines, published by Springer in 2017. We are so thrilled to hear from Claudine today. And joining Claudine is Victoria, the GenderScan Program Manager, conducting data analysis and research on gender equality in education and in the workplace. She's had studied in the Institute of Political Studies in Paris and at the University of Salamanca, where she worked afterwards in research networks, consulting firms, and international organizations in Europe and Latin America, and has published numerous research pieces, notably articles and book chapters. We are so thrilled to have Victoria and Claudine here today to share about their latest GenderScan research. And so without further ado, let me turn it over to these two wonderful speakers.
Well, thanks so much, Amanda. It's also a great experience for us to sort of share some of our finding with your audience. It's your NGCP is definitely a great initiative, which actually we recognize as one, leading expert in the United States. So we were very much honored by the fact that you invited us, and that before that you were a partner to our survey in the United States in 2021. Basically, what we do right at GenderScan is that we develop surveys on women in STEM, and we've been doing so now, as Amanda highlighted, for about over 10 years. We have first, as many of you must have heard, the issue of women in STEM is characterized by the framework, which is called the leaky pipeline. The image refers to the fact that you have an equal proportion of girls and boys at a very young age, which have about the same capabilities, both in math and sciences. But then as they grow up, the power of stereotypes grows. And the result is that when at the end of secondary studies, just before entering universities, already the proportion of women who actually declare that they're interested in STEM studies has decreased in a significant manner. So much so that in the United States, the proportion of women is below 30% in all STEM studies. This STEM word, as you may know, refers to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We do not include in it medical studies. We really refer to the whole corpus of math, physics, mechanics, engineering, and etc. But we do not include medical sciences, because in that area, as you may very well know, there is no issue about women underrepresentation at all. So as we've been working on this subject for now many years, we've been developing a lot of frameworks regarding what happens to women in STEM jobs. And in 2021, for the first time, we started a new survey focused on teenagers. Because actually, for having worked on the topic for over 10 years, what I see is that actually, when you do a very thorough analysis of a corpus of data, such as the PISA analysis from the OECD or TIMSS survey, which is a worldwide survey, as you may know, which is tests and evaluates the level of children and teenagers in math and math for TIMSS. What we see actually is that when, particularly in the PISA survey, is that when the level of the girls' level is very much linked with the level of confidence they have in themselves. And basically the results that they have when they're about 14 or 15 years old gives us a very good idea of what will happen after. 3 or 4 years after this test, we see that when the girls have a good level of confidence in themselves and at school and education, then they will be more easily projecting themselves and entering STEM studies. And the opposite is true. When in fact you see that there is a confidence deficit, then the proportion of girls who enter these studies is much lower. And this goes with results which are not as good. So what we decided to look into in 2021 was basically what was how did girls and boys, because we always compare, that's one of the particularities of our analysis, is that we always compare the results, I mean the perceptions of boys and girls, to try to understand where there are differences and or similarities. So what we did was basically to investigate what were the perception of boys and girls on digital jobs and digital training and education. And as you will see, we've been really sort of exploring if they felt or what they felt about these jobs, what how they felt about these possibilities of working in that sector, what kind of jobs they were thinking of. And basically, as you will see, there are really interesting findings regarding, how you can perhaps push forward and stimulate the motivation of boys and girls, and more specifically girls, of course. Next, perhaps we can move on to the next slide, Amanda. Thanks a lot. So as I was saying, we will be exploring, Victoria will be presenting to you what boys and girls think about STEM professions. Are they made for boys equally and girls equally or not? What kind of STEM professions do they dream of? What inhibits, or to the contrary, what triggers the interests of girls in STEM fields? And then we will share with you some insights resulting from our survey conducted with students, women studying in STEM fields at university. And as you will see, there are interesting observations we can make regarding basically how we can build more efficient way of stimulating the interests of younger ones to STEM studies. Now, I think that Victoria will be presenting you the data, and I will be presenting quickly the conclusion at the end of her presentation. Thanks. Next.
So just a quick methodology note on the data that we'll be presenting to you today. We've prepared a mix. As Claudine was saying, we do research on the whole leaky pipeline. So from early secondary school students to women and men in the workplace. So now I'll be presenting to you today a mix of the results of our teenage survey and of our student survey in developed countries. As you can see, we had about 3,000 answers in the developed world, so the global north. And our data have been through two tests, which it is the chi-square test and the z-test, which attest the solidity of our data. So the hypotheses we'll be exploring today are statistically valid. And to make sure that we have data from all the world that's comparable, the definitions of teenager and student and of STEM fields and of ICT fields I'll be referring to are based on a UNESCO parameter, which is called the International Standard Classification of Education. You can have more details on our studies on our website, but this is just to give you an overview of the data we'll be presenting. So next, please. So the first data we brought to you today is very basic question we asked teenagers. Do you think that ICT jobs are as suited for women as they are for men? So in this last edition of the survey, we did a focus on ICT because it is the area within STEM which has the least gender balance at present. And the answers were very, very positive. As you can see, over 90% of boys and girls said, yes, of course, it's equally, they're equally suited for women and men. Next, please. And then we analyzed what they said about why they gave such an answer, right? So we after the yes or no, we asked why, and we analyzed those 3,000 answers, and we had some categories or some trends of argument they used, and we bring them to you here on the slide. So the first argument in proportion that we had was that women and men are equal in essence. We're born equal, we have the same abilities, we have equal rights, and we can have the same professional path if we wish. It's absurd to think otherwise. So about half boys and girls said that. And the second argument in proportion was that there are no gendered professions at all. So, and this was brought up by more girls than boys. They say, as I put you in the slide, some very representative quotes. All genders are capable of the same thing. Some are better in coding, but it depends on the person. Gender has no role in this. And then the third argument in proportion, brought up by more boys than girls, is the one that says that, well, it's not that all professions are not gendered. Some are, but ICT is not one of them. So it is interesting to see that about a quarter of boys responding in the global north said this, that gender does not matter for these jobs specifically. And these are the most common answers we saw, which tells us that we still have a long way to go towards equality, although we've made significant progress too. So next slide, please. The next set of data we would like to show is a question we asked them about their future. So great news. They think ICT professions are equally suited for women and men, but do they see themselves in these fields in the future? And the answer is they don't see themselves in this sector in the future equally. Their gender does play a role in this. So 22% more boys than girls said they would like to follow such a path, right? 30% of boys, 8% of girls. This is a significant gender difference. And 25% more girls than boys said they would not like to follow such a path in the future, which tells us that although in general they see these professions as equally suited for women and men, in practice, and when we talk about professional projects, gender is still a factor. Next, please. Then again, we asked them to talk a little bit more about why they said what they said. So we asked girls and boys who said they would not like to follow such a career. Why? Why not? And we identified the main arguments that were brought up. And the first one in proportion was, I'm not interested in ICT. I simply don't like it, without giving, too much explanation. Although there is a nuance here, as more girls than boys said this at all, 61% girls and 49% of boys. And girls tended to say things such as, well, I'd rather work with people than with machines. I think this is rather abstract for me. This is not very concrete. I like something that allows me to help others. And boys simply said, no, I don't like it. It doesn't please me too much. And then the second argument in proportion was, I don't want this because I want something else. And a higher proportion of boys were more decided, so to speak, about this other view than girls. And then we had some other arguments, but which were not significant in proportion. So next, please. Now, complementing these findings with some data from our student survey, so regarding students who are in university in STEM fields, we asked them if they had been discouraged by someone from this decision, from choosing scientific and technical fields. And the answers are, as you can see on the slide, telling us that gender plays a really big role in how people are encouraged or discouraged from this. Half of women were discouraged from choosing STEM, while only a third of their male counterparts were discouraged in the global north. So next, please. And then again, we went, to dig further into the question, and we asked those who were discouraged. So who discouraged you? Who said, well, this is maybe not a good idea? And the answers are, as you can see on the slides, that teachers were the top discouragers. They discouraged about half of women and men responding. And then family and friends were the next discouragers. Now, family members and friends discouraged a higher percentage of women than men, and they discouraged more women in ICT fields, more women and men in ICT than in STEM. Next, please. So we asked these young women and men to tell us what these people told them in order to, tell them not to go into these fields. And the arguments they heard were basically four. The first one in proportion is, it's not a field for women. Basically, you shouldn't follow these careers because, it's for men. About a quarter of women in STEM fields heard this. And 31% of women in ICT fields heard this. So it really tells us we have a long way to go towards equality, right? And then the second argument in proportion was that they were not good enough. It's too difficult. It's the top argument heard by men. So more than 40% of men heard this, and more than a third of women heard this. And it's sad to think that there's people around students saying that if you're not a genius, you can't even think about doing such a job, right? And it tells us that many people really underestimate the power of motivation, because while, students may not have the top marks, they may be so passionate that they'll make great engineers and scientists. Next, about 15% of women responding. Oh, no, sorry. Can you come back to the, yeah, sorry. Thank you. So the next argument in proportion is regarding the atmosphere. So about 15% of women said they heard they should not go into STEM because they would be the only girl in the room. Teachers would be hostile. Employers would discriminate against them. And this is a real situation, but it's one we must fight against, not accept. And prescribers should tell students that, they will find support if something wrong happens, not that they should accept this, not that they, it's how it is, don't go there, it's too much suffering. And last but not least, a small percentage of men and women heard that this is not useful, this is not a real job. Maybe because people surrounding them don't know much about the field, so they can't really imagine the jobs that these degrees give access to, or the real amount of pay these people get, right? Next slide, please. Now, to brighten up the scenario a bit, let's talk about some solutions to these issues. One important trigger of interest of teenagers in STEM, more specifically in ICT, are the extracurricular activities. So coding schools, summer camps, and this sort of activity that young people take part in. So in developed countries, we don't see a very significant change in the proportion of girls who say they are interested in pursuing a career in these fields after such a training. While this effect is much more important on boys, as you can see, 53% more boys said they would like to follow such a career after digital training, while only 10% more girls said they would like to follow such a path after such a training. So you may ask me, but why are you saying this is an important catalyst if it doesn't have such a great impact? Well, because we brought our data from the Global South, developing countries, to show that these activities have a potential which is not being used currently to really bring more girls into STEM. As in developing countries, we see a very high increase in the percentage of girls who say they would like to take such a path after these activities. Now, it can seem puzzling, right? This paradox, this result. We have some factors which could explain this. First is the one that in developing countries, literature and experts tell us that these kinds of extracurricular activities, they're more oriented towards solving problems of reality around them. So if the community around the students have problems of waste collection or landslide or, I don't know, sexual harassment in bus stops, students taking these activities are encouraged to use these digital tools, use the skills they're developing to create solutions, to create tools to help. And this kind of approach is much more attractive for girls who have been exposed to or expected to behave in a kind of thinking which is more community-oriented than boys. While in developed countries, these activities, they are more technical, and they tend to be focused on the skills themselves, which is an approach more appealing for boys than it is for girls. And second factor is, of course, the fact that interest is already high in these careers and these subjects in developing countries, even among teenagers without digital training. So this digital training only boosts trend, which is already there, because in developing countries, it's harder to make a living out of other professions, right? To make a decent living out of traditional professions, so to speak, than in developed countries. And so these jobs, which currently offer high pay and interesting career prospects, they're very much sought after. Parents and teachers encourage very much bright boys and girls to follow such a path. So this encouragement from their surrounding really pushes them into following these fields. So next slide, please. So we asked also the students who said they would like to follow these careers. The 63% of boys and the 38% of, the 8% of girls and 30% of boys who said they would like to follow such a career. So why would you like to be in STEM in the future? And now you can see some of the elements I was discussing earlier. The highest percentage of responses were in the sense that, well, I just like this field, it interests me. More boys than girls brought this up. And again, there is a certain nuance in answers, as boys are simply saying, well, it amuses me, it's fun, I like it. I like developing software, I like gaming, I like gadgets. And girls are saying, well, I like it because it enables me to be creative. I like it because it allows me to express myself. So it's the same argument, but it doesn't go in the same direction. And then the second argument in proportion for girls, which was the one that we would really like to highlight and that really struck us, is that 20% more girls than boys said they like ICT, they like digital skills and jobs because they are a very great tool. So they say, I'll be a police officer and I need to know how to manage databases, or I'll be an architect and I need to know how to design using virtual tools. My future job requires this. So I will, learn these skills and I will follow these degrees because they allow me to open doors I want to open. They allow me to do things I want to do. And so this is maybe something to take into account when talking to girls, when developing activities to attract girls into STEM. And this, very importantly, is a trend which we observe in developed countries and in developing countries equally. Next, we can, sorry, next slide, please. Now, back to the student survey, maybe another message we should get across to girls is the fact that university students in STEM fields and in ICT fields, they're very much satisfied of their choice of studies. And this is practically equal for women and men. So we should tell the girls that, well, it may seem harsh, it may not seem the obvious choice, but those who do go there, they're happy. They're happy about what they're doing in the present, and they're happy about their prospects. And this is not the case for many other fields, So women in STEM are as happy as boys, and there's a satisfaction level of almost 100%. So this is significant data, and this is something we should talk about when talking to girls. Next slide, please. Now, some more data on the general feeling of women and men, students in STEM and in ICT. We see that the proportion of satisfaction is generally very high and very similar. Although there's a certain gender gap in ICT, slightly higher in ICT than in STEM. Just a trend which goes against this general satisfaction level is the fact that more women than men feel in competition in their studies in STEM, which may be explained by the fact that they feel they need to prove themselves more and over again to have the same level of respect that their male peers have, and also by what we call the tug-of-war bias. There are not many women in the room, so to have the one woman spot, they feel in competition between one another. So this is something we need to look at, but generally, the scenario is very, very positive. Next slide, please. Now, one last aspect we wanted to explore with you today is the effect that lack of confidence has even in women who actually made it to STEM. When we asked university students what were the factors of dissatisfaction they had with their studies, the greatest gender gaps we had in the responses concerned level of stress and the feeling they don't have the required level to succeed. They're not good enough. So a significantly higher percentage of women than men said that these are the greatest problems they face in their studies. Now, it's easy to understand that when you think that these women, they've been hearing for years that they're not capable, that this is not for them, it's not their place, it's not their kind of intelligence, it's a man's job and whatsoever. So it does impact on their performance, on their well-being at university, and it possibly leads to some of them abandoning these studies for others where they feel more at ease, where they feel more comfortable, where they are led to doubt themselves more. And we can infer that at professional level, this lack of confidence that we as a society generating girls in STEM fields later create situations where women turn down jobs of responsibility. You know, they say they don't want to manage teams or projects or direct an institution because they think they're not capable, because they have nothing to do there. They're not good enough. While men are actually saying, yeah, sure, I can take this on. Thank you very much. This is a very well due recognition of my skills and my experience. So this gap, as you can see, is more important for ICT than for STEM. And so it tells us that it's really important, you know, to fight stereotypes of the geek boy or of computers and games being fitter for boys and somehow they're for girls. And it's also important to promote in universities sense of support, mentoring schemes, coaching schemes, networking schemes, negotiation workshops to help women integrate and stay confident and feel sure of themselves, you know. So we need to support girls all along the path. Otherwise, the pipeline will keep leaking. We'll keep losing women in the beginning as they are teenagers deciding what to do, and then as they are women in their studies and in the workplace also. So I think we can move towards the conclusion. Claudine, if you want to take over or let me know.
Yes, thanks a lot, Victoria, for this overview of our results, both regarding the teenager and the student survey. So basically, what we would like to share with you in terms of conclusion is that what we see based on those results is that you have a real issue which stems from the fact that basically girls right now have a very even though we've seen that there have been progresses in terms of, you know, the perception of digital studies and jobs and sectors which are supposed to be not gender whatever equally accessible to both boys and girls. You have seen on all the other elements, the way they project themselves in jobs, the way they look at the various options and possibilities, that even though they are more numerous, if you've looked at the proportions that were quoted in the verbatims, you've seen that there were much fewer girls to whom it is being said by their teachers, you don't have the right level, you know. Many more girls have the right levels. Nevertheless, many more girls are said, you know, it's not for them because they are girls, and that's where you raise a confidence problem. That's where you see a sort of issues that sort of builds up. In other words, the level is there. The brains are actually equally good, of course, but the fact is that stereotypes undermine the confidence and undermine the way girls project themselves in those types of jobs. So one element of solution that you could see is actually the way the subject is approached in developing countries. In fact, the best data that we've seen comes from Latin America. If you look at the data in Latin America, you will see that the proportion of girls in these countries in STEM fields, studies and jobs has been very low over the past 10 or 15 years. However, when you look at the data on the teenager, you can see that there is a shift. If you remember the proportion that Victoria mentioned, she mentioned the fact that actually there were over 50% girls, even more, who were feeling like entering digital jobs. So there is something which is working well. And this is the result of the implementation of a sort of new methodology, a methodology which is kind of systemic in its approach. In other words, I don't know if you do work on a regular basis with teenagers or, perhaps younger people, but whatever in the United States, I know you share the same conclusion as the one we see in Europe, which is basically that, there have been many initiatives to boost the proportion of girls in STEM, and it hasn't been very successful. The proportion of women in these fields hasn't been increasing in a significant manner. To the contrary, in some areas, particularly in the digital areas, it's been decreasing. So basically in Latin America, they were facing the same issue. And you see that right now there is something which is changing, because you have an equal proportion of boys and girls who want to enter the digital sector, which is actually the sector in developed countries where you have the lowest proportion of women altogether in most European and Western countries. How did they do that in Latin America? How did they succeed in doing that? Well, they implemented a systemic approach. This, in fact, demonstrates that we need to implement a more innovative approach. And this innovation, in fact, requires three complementary elements. We must stop talking only to girls. We must start talking to girls and boys and teachers and parents, right? If you think of the data that we've shown you on women in STEM studies, it's amazing, right? You see that about 45% of women who are right now in STEM studies have done so, even though they were discouraged. And who were they discouraged by? They were discouraged either by the teachers. 60% of them declared they've been discouraged by these teachers, and 30% by their parents. So a girl is not isolated. I mean, if you talk to only a girl, it's not enough, because in front of her, she has her parents, she has her teachers, she has all those prescribers who have who bear a great influence on them. We have other studies which demonstrate, and you, I'm sure, know of many of them, that the influence of parents and teachers is stronger on girls than it tends to be on boys. They have more influence on girls than they do have on boys, which tend to have a more diversified range of people whom they will seek advice from. So this is the first element. You must start developing strategies to develop activities involving girls, but not only them, also boys, so that they have a better perception of what girls can do in these fields, teachers, and that's, for instance, develop activities and animations involving teachers at school in extracurricular activities sometimes. And last, parents. We actually are developing Coding Goûter in France right now, which involve the parents and the people and friends from the young ones. So that's the way to do it. So that's the first point. Talk to the girls and their prescribers. That's the first element. The second element, which I think is also very important, is that you have to build over time. One activity is not enough. You have to build over time, and you have to build over a period of at least 2, 3, or 4 years, a sequence of activities which will be reinforcing one another, hopefully, right? If you just do only one of these activities, that's not enough. So that's the second message. Build a sequence of activities over a period of 2 to 3 or 4 years. And the fourth, it's not always possible for some, for all of you, but I'm sure I understand that perfectly. But what I think is that if there is a better way of perhaps communicating one another and sharing knowledge between networks, you can actually achieve that. And the third element, which is also extremely important, is measuring the impact. What I think could be one of the reasons for which you don't see the results is that there are very, very few organizations that do conduct a specific and precise measurement developed with researchers, on gender researchers, on how does it change and how does it modify the perception of teachers, prescribers, and children and teenagers. And you must have this measurement impact system built since the very beginning for each activity, so that you see how it works, because that's how you can challenge the program you've developed. See if they fit, if they do not fit, if the message is heard or not heard. Because the problem with all the many activities that have been developed so far is that for those who are already sort of, kind of interested, it will strengthen their determination. And you see how much useful it is, because you see that you have 40% of women who are students studying STEM who've been discouraged. So all the activities that have been developed to which they've attended have sort of supported their determination to move forward nevertheless. So it's very helpful, but it doesn't help to fight the decrease. So we need to be more forceful in measuring the impact, to always challenge what we've been doing and always move forward and develop new and more innovative approach. So these would be the lever that we've identified as a result of this survey. Because obviously what you see is that when you don't have access to these activities such as the one developed by the National Girl Project, such as perhaps some of those activities that you yourself develop, then what you see, what you witness is a sort of a lack of confidence that overall prevails. And when you have this lack of confidence, you have a lack of interest in STEM, and it's sort of a negative trend that takes place. So these were sort of the conclusion, because really the focus of Gender Scan is not to generate data for the sake of data. It's to generate data so that we can identify proper lever and challenge our way of thinking to develop new and more positive approach of enable, in order to enable equal involvement of women in STEM, and that's a challenge. So I guess this finishes the presentation, Amanda.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Claudine and Victoria. I really appreciate how you've broken down the results of this really complicated survey with so many complicated factors and highlighted that all for us. I know that many people have a lot of comments and questions. The chat has been really active and robust. So what I'm going to do is stop sharing, and we'll get a few questions from the audience for Victoria and Claudine. And then I've actually just been told that Jennifer made it onto the webinar. So we'll wrap up with Jennifer sharing a few notes before we wrap up our time together today. So without further ado, let's jump into some of the Q&A. I know a lot of people have put questions in. I'm going to start with the first question that I saw come in directly to me, and then I will browse through the chat and Q&A and feed in as many as we have time for. So the first question is, in everyday life outside of this research context that you are a part of, do you have any suggestions for what teachers, parents, relatives, and caregivers should actually say in terms of boosting girls' self-confidence? So what should they actually be saying or doing with girls to boost their self-confidence?
Well, first thing I would advise, and Victoria will come, you're welcome to add additional commentaries to what I say. What I would suggest is that when you think of girls at a young age, definitely you should start with offering them non-gender toys, like scientific, toys, chemist or whatever. Do a little bit, learn to play with digital tools and etc. What I see that from the testimonial of the students that we have, which are actually very passionate with their studies, is that the impact of experience when they were very young, before being 7 years old, is very strong. So as a parent, I would advise to think of scientific games when you're very young. Then I would say that what you need to say is that women to girls, well, just open your eyes, and that some of the strongest discovery have been made by women, that women play a pioneering role in the digital sector. We all know about Ada Lovelace, but there is Gladys West, there is Hedy Lamarr, who invented the Wi-Fi and who was a wonderful actress, and at the same time developed the Wi-Fi that we all rely upon right now. Do you know that today, if the COVID has been fought for in an efficient manner, it's thanks to a woman, a woman discovery, Katalin Karikó, right? And who knows about Katalin Karikó? I mean, the issue is that so many of us are invisible. So I would invite them to play a game. Find for me some women who in that area and some of the discovery they've made, and you'll be surprised at the number of women who are doing incredible things today in the world, in artificial intelligence, in quantics, electronics, and etc. I mean, it's just amazing. It's just that they're invisible. So, okay, open your eyes, let's play together. Let's play Charlie, what the game, the cartoon Charlie, you have to find where Charlie is. You remember? Does it ring a bell to some of you? No? It doesn't? I don't see you saying yes. So there is a big cartoon which is very famous in here in Europe, where you have this huge cartoon with many figures, and you have to find this little person who is called Charlie, right? Well, let's play Charlie with women. I mean, basically, there are so many women in so many fields. Open your eyes and look for them. I think it would be the first thing I would say. And trust yourself, and there is no reason for which there is no difference between a man's mind and a woman's mind, so there's no issue about that. So you should go for it. And a last argument I think I would mention, aside to open your eyes, is the fact that innovation are gendered kills men and women today. The lack of women in science and tech is a killer. It's been demonstrated by actually Stanford Innovation, the Gendered Innovation Department of Stanford. She has shown that, for instance, gendered research in some areas of medical research, for instance, bones and etc., is goes with the fact that some pathology as not seen and not diagnosed at the time where they should be identified, and this kills men and women because of the lack of the gendered approach. Another very striking example is the car crash example. In the automotive sector, for many years, they only used men's mannequin. I don't know if you say mannequin, Amanda.
Mannequin?
Mannequin.
Yes, mannequin.
Yeah, mannequin. They used, those, and they all are male based, right? They were all male, right? And surprisingly, as a result of that, there were many more women killed because the body of a woman is not like the body of a man. And among these women that died, there were many pregnant women, right? So come on, go for it. And the last element that I would say is basically, wow, we're facing so many challenges. Take your part. fight.
If I can
And it's
just
so
add,
challenging. I think it's stimulating to think of that.
if I can just add some elements, I mean, really practical things that parents and teachers can do. One is demystify STEM skills as something of geniuses, like just saying, you know, to girls, like nobody's born knowing how to ride a bike. Math skill is just like anything, any other skill, you develop it. You know, if you put effort and time into it, you'll get good. There's no mystery, because it's really important to, you know, for boys, but for girls especially. And then inform also girls of the advantages of STEM studies and careers, because our studies shows that girls are less informed than boys, that these jobs pay well, that they offer interesting career prospects, that they allow to collaborate internationally. So sometimes just saying, you know, do you know that you can travel internationally working in STEM? Do you know that you can be an engineer and build some really nice things? We take for granted that information's there and our teenagers are informed, but maybe not. And lastly, parents and teachers can accompany them in checking application processes, how to enroll. Let's check, there's an engineering college close by. Let's check the process, because sometimes girls have misconceptions about how difficult it is, and boys just go for it and girls don't. But maybe taking them by their hand and showing them that they are supported and that the process is not so harsh. It may seem silly, but it's really important, I think.
Thank you, Claudine and Victoria, for those responses and those suggestions. I think for all the other parents, educators, caregivers in the audience today, you've provided a lot of food for thought, a lot of fuel, and a lot of practical suggestions. Like you said, Victoria, just simply demystifying this idea that some people are naturally good at science or math and that it takes hard work, but you can do it and here's how, is so critical. And that exposure, we don't know what we don't know. So having them actually know about these careers and these possibilities of things that they can do is so important. Some of the NGCP resources we dropped in earlier, like the If Then collection and Fab Femmes, those are great resources to expose teenagers and even a little bit younger to the possible career paths and roles that are out there. Okay, we have lots of questions. We're going to try to do as many as we can. So I'm going to put together two methodological questions that came in. They were addressed a little bit in the chat, but just in case some people are watching us all speak and aren't looking at the chat, could you clarify two things? One, did you collect data from any non-binary students?
Absolutely.
And then another methodology piece is, were you collecting data on self-confidence in general or self-confidence specifically as it relates to STEM? So I'll mute and let you talk about those two aspects of your research.
Okay, regarding the non-binary, yeah, absolutely. The survey was opened to non-binary respondents, but unfortunately, we didn't have enough non-binary respondents to enable a statistical exploitation, because we submit the data that we share with, you know, statistical tests like a chi-square test and etc. I mean, a whole series of tests so that it's robust. And when you have too few respondents, then it cannot work. Basically, we didn't really focus our survey on self-confidence. We focused it much more on the perception of STEM altogether. We actually, that's the issue, because there are specific tests on confidence. That was not the focus of our survey.
But just if I may add, the issues we were discussing today were about confidence related to STEM, because we see that there is a real difference between boys and girls when it comes to how good they think they are in STEM. Like, there are many studies proving that if you present an activity to a girl saying it's a math problem, and then you present the same activity saying it's a creativity problem, she'll do better when you say it's creativity related than when you say it's math related. While boys don't care if it's creativity or math. So we're focused on the self-confidence related to STEM and on the self-efficacy, so to speak, on the image they have of themselves in relation to these fields.
Got it. Thank you both for that clarification. Helps us put your data and research into context a little bit better. Okay, I have kind of a fun one that came into the Q&A. If you could wave a magic wand over the lives of 6 to 10-year-old girls, I know this is a little bit younger than the girls in your research, but if you could wave a magic wand over the lives of 6 to 10-year-old girls to make them more likely to choose a STEM career, what would you want that wand to do? You already mentioned non-gendered toys, but is there anything else? So you have the power in this magic wand. Claudine and Victoria, what would you do?
I think I would really focus on non-gendered toys, and I guess I would highlight the fictions, the cartoons where they are wonderful. Some of them have wonderful examples of good role models. So I would try to find cartoons or fictions that would highlight women in a great manner. Because when you're 6 to 10, it's a matter of how you occupy your leisure time. No, don't you think? I see Jennifer is wondering. No, Jennifer?
Victoria, do you want to add anything? And speaking of the role models and media, sorry, just a moment if I spoke over someone, give you an extra minute to think. In March, we haven't posted this webinar yet, but we will have a great webinar that will be talking about a picture book that's all about paleontology. And this is exactly what Claudine is saying, more media, more examples to get girls and kids in general interested in different STEM fields. So we'll have an educator and scientist on talking about how we can use things like picture books, like media, to inspire and delight girls from a young age in STEM. So I definitely think that was a great suggestion.
What I would like to do is see perhaps a sort of a challenge, or I know challenging like a movie festival on women role models in cartoons or whatsoever. That would be great. The best the best movies, the movies which are proving to be the most efficient or whatever, or the most entertaining and efficient, highlighting women accomplishment.
Victoria, I believe I might have stumbled over you. Did you have something to add? Was that you who had unmuted?
Sure. So just if I had the wand, I think I'd have a bot send every girl a WhatsApp message every day, or something related to media, because social networks and WhatsApp and these tools, they're more and more part of young people's lives, and it's their reality. So what they see there is like real, the influencers and the TikTok videos and so on. I'd have a bot send them everyday messages saying like, I don't know, do you know this girl in your neighborhood or in your city, or like some real life model, like not someone really far away. She's a great engineer. You can be one too. Or yeah, saying like really inspiring stories or demystifying STEM skills. I think somehow the virtual world has to be more used to catalyze the interest of girls in STEM. So I'd have a bot work for girls every day with some kind of message that encourages them.
That really makes sense, reaching them through the modes of communication and the digital world that they're already using for social communication. We don't have that bot, we don't have that magic wand, but my colleagues Brenda and Nancy can pop in some social media that might be interesting, along Victoria's points, that do share out different role models and resources and careers. These are more tailored to the adults who serve girls than the girls themselves, but it's still still a resource along those lines that people might be interested in. And of course, if you haven't already followed GenderScan and Claudine and Victoria, definitely follow their Twitter accounts and our NGCP accounts. We can put all of that social media in the chat again as well. That made me think of the importance of social media, and I have to remember to mention that. Okay, let's do one more question comment, and then we'll move on to introducing Jennifer, and we'll actually have Jennifer kind of close out our guest speaking portion of the webinar and move into our call to action, which I'll explain after Jennifer speaks. But one more little comment that came in that I thought was interesting is that, Victoria, your comments suggest that including the arts and humanities might play an important role in encouraging girls in STEM. You also mentioned creativity and things like that. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more, or anything else you can unpack about that? Or do you agree with that statement?
Absolutely, it is a way to go, because it's not so much because of arts and humanities themselves, but the way society expects girls and boys to behave. So we expect girls to be more serving, to be helping others more, to be more community oriented or people oriented, and boys to just be themselves, to just do whatever they like. And arts and humanities, I mean, they are about self-expression, and they are about connecting to others, and they are about thinking critically about our reality. So the more we can actually mainstream arts and humanities into STEM related activities, I think the more we'll have girls interested and actually taking the STEM path. Absolutely.
Thank you. Great comments, great questions in the chat. We'll keep trying to respond directly in the chat as much as possible. And I think what we'll do before I introduce Jennifer is actually just wrap up with all of our housekeeping and links and notes so that we can end on this motivational and powerful speaking notes that Jennifer has to share with all of us. So a little bit of a call to action based on Victoria and Claudine's great data and research that they shared. We will pop into the chat a couple of Google Drive folders that you have generously put together for our audience here, full of infographics and resources that are great for social media. And what an excellent segue. Just a few moments ago, Victoria was talking about social media and posting this important information out there. We'd love to encourage all of you here today to access those folders, grab those great infographics, find something, a statistic or a piece of research that really stuck out to you today and you found really meaningful or impactful, and share it on your social audiences. Tag GenderScan, tag NGCP, and we will amplify and retweet and reshare. We would love to see this discussion around the research continue and the questions that you have continue to happen off of our webinar. And also, if you're interested in learning more about potentially getting involved with future research with Victoria and Claudine and GenderScan, I believe Victoria has a link that she can pop into the chat of ways that you can stay connected to future opportunities. But now it is my absolute pleasure. I'm so sorry that you had technical problems getting on, Jennifer, but I'm so thrilled that you are here. Nancy, if you don't mind just enabling me to share my screen one more time while I read a little bit of an intro of Jennifer. Jennifer Breslin is the executive director and founder of Futuristas, a nonprofit organization that seeks to build more responsive and responsible STEM and innovation ecosystems with a focus on youth programming and networked partnerships. Previously, Jennifer has worked for over 2 decades in the United Nations system on STI for global development, establishing or growing related portfolios in several UN organizations, including UN Women, the UN Development Program, and the Department for Economic and Social Affairs. Her work spanned technical support to country offices around the world, program development, research and advocacy, and national and global policy and framework development. We are absolutely honored that you're here. We wanted you here to kick off our webinar, and I think it is even more powerful to have you here to close our webinar and wrap up and bring together all of the different voices and research that we have heard. So let me go ahead and share your slides for you. Hopefully everyone can see this, and I will go ahead and unmute and let you speak for just a few moments.
Thank you so much. And I'm truly sorry that I wasn't able to come on and set the stage. And so now I will, I think, take this piece and try and connect it into this bigger picture of gender and STEM issues globally. So I wanted to just share some of my own reflections from having worked in this space for so long, and also to highlight some of the main recommendations from the report prepared for the upcoming UN Commission on the Status of Women, which is a global meeting that brings thousands of delegates from around the world, from all countries as part of the UN system for a few weeks. And this year, the theme is on technology and innovation and the empowerment of girls and women. So this has been considered by the Commission before in previous years, but this is really an important time to revisit these issues and take stock. So I'm going to just highlight a few things, which is already pretty dense, as you'll see. This is a big topic, but I just wanted to kind of give a picture of the global thinking and some very macro level considerations. So just to start, of course, we always look at what are the sort of trends that we're facing, and these are rather persistent and formidable trends, which are very familiar to all of you, which include, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating what GenderScan presented, but just very quickly, gender disparities in access to and use of technologies, the relevance of technologies for women's needs, access to meaningful STEM education, representation in careers and decision-making, funding, issues of harassment in the workplace, stereotypes, which I know that you've talked about as well in GenderScan's work, online violence against women, and then this backlash that we see when gains are made. And then, of course, there are still a myriad of phenomenal opportunities that science, technology, and innovation bring that must be better harnessed to serve women and girls. And there still are considerable gaps on that front as well. Okay, next slide. All right, I did update my slides, but that's okay. So that's the picture that we're facing, but I think it's important to just step back a little bit and ask what is our goal here? What is it that we're trying to achieve? Is it to bring more women into STEM? Are we doing this through numbers, or are we actually looking at transforming power dynamics in the technology sector? Do we want to transform the outcomes of ICT and STEM to better society as a whole and a larger swath of society? Do we want representation, or do we want to more fundamentally transform gender equality and women's empowerment within society? So if we want to look at that broader scope, then we really need to tackle asymmetries in focus and emphasis that we're seeing right now. So what you see in this table is a call to move from this kind of more narrow economic, sectoral, and individual focused interests and approaches, and this sort of general attitude of anything goes, or the Wild West that you see sometimes in the tech sector, to one that is more focused on society and current and future benefits to the totality of humanity, shifted priorities that have broader reach, greater collaboration and participation in technology sector, and addressing structural inequity and accountability. And these areas in the second column really all have at their core principles of feminism, the goal of women's empowerment and gender equality, and really like deliberate action behind them to engage women and women's organizations in decision making. Okay, next slide. So what does this look like in reality? How do we achieve this? And maybe I'll just go through this a little bit more quickly. But in looking at the public good. So moving from private to public good. It means creating more robust participatory governance structures and a digital commons. And this is actually a big focus of the UN right now. There's a big global effort around developing a digital kind of common agenda, manifesto, and commons, where the benefits of tech are more widely distributed, where there's a human-centered approach, where there are private and public infrastructures, issues of data rights and data commons. In taking a human rights-based approach, it means that technology is directed to enjoin a range of human rights like civil, political, social, cultural, and economic rights, which would include things like labor issues rather than just economic growth, for instance. Environmental issues, and these are all as important as economic growth. And it would account for things like privacy rights. And for women and girls in particular, it would really focus on technology facilitated violence against women and adequately tackling that and building in accountability mechanisms and so on. So that's a critical component as well of the human rights issues. So that technology is not othered, and this is something that I think I saw a lot even in UN Women, that technology is something else for someone else to think about and worry about, perceived as being done by somebody else. We need to really integrate technology much more into society. So really those STEM and society linkages need to be much stronger. We need to take many more interdisciplinary approaches that combine social sciences, with science and technology disciplines, and that would also include arts as well, and STEAM. Engaging with media and popular culture, as you just talked about, and then also looking at kind of technology across a person's life cycle. So not just sort of like these little entry points for a career or just your studies, but much broader than that. And so how do we come together across sectors and in a whole of society approach to do this? And the ecosystem approaches in STEM education that we're seeing, and girls' empowerment within that kind of reflects this ethos. I think this is a really important one. Rather than putting the onus on individuals to protect themselves online, for women to step up in the workspace, to interject themselves into like spaces of influence, we really need to shift the burden away from girls and women and put it on the institutional barriers that prevent them, and the kind of the structural issues that prevent them from participating fully in technology and from benefiting from it. And then to create ones that are actually enabling. So this looks at issues of policy, law, funding, investment, access, education, norms, engaging with socializing agents, and so on. In considering digital literacy, which is a big focus in a lot of our work as well, we need to go beyond kind of transactional or basic safety or coding skills to positioning girls and women and men and boys as digital citizens, so that they understand the how, the why, the what, kind of whole of life in relationship to technology, looking at responsible behavior and ethics, meaningful use of digital technology, personal and civic engagement in relation to technology, in addition to studies and livelihoods, to really impart a sense of critical thinking and media literacy. And then also creating a sense of agency and ownership in this sector, so that you're not just sort of passive recipients of it as individuals and in your professions or studies, but that you have a say in this. It's not techno determinism, right? It's creating that sense of agency amongst young women too, which is quite empowering. Then very quickly, I think we need to do much more around anticipation and getting ahead of problems rather than simply reacting to them, which you can do through futures thinking methodologies. And I think that's quite exciting, because then you're imagining the future that you want and then working backwards from that. That hasn't really been tried very much, and that's actually something I'm quite interested in playing around with as a way of engaging girls in particular. And then finally, to kind of conclude on the issue of knowledge, which I had put it in the column the where we are now is kind of the breaking things, and that we're trying to move a little bit more to knowledge and innovation. So this attitude of break things and move fast isn't quite working. It hasn't really disrupted the patriarchy. So why don't we look at kind of richer knowledge generation and richer learning, and looking at issues of longitudinal studies and understanding and impact. How do we know what's working and what doesn't? There's a talk a lot about kind of care and repair, and how do we fix things in society rather than just breaking them, and how can technology work for that? Innovation, you mentioned that, Claudine, as well. How can we be much more innovative when we're hitting dead ends? You know, we do a lot of the anti-bias training, and there's now lots and lots of reports that say this isn't very effective. So, and this is yet something where there's kind of been, everyone's jumped on that bandwagon and put a lot of focus on that. So how do we innovate? How do we do more around collective action so that we're not all kind of doing the same thing as well? Like, what are the pieces that we can follow so that we have eggs in many baskets, and then we're, you know, creating an omelet out of that together. And then the research and data component is so critical. I mean, and this is something that we see constantly over and over again in the UN, is that we don't have the research, we don't have the data is sparse, it's not comparable across countries, you know, and this is what grabs a lot of policymakers' attention, and this is what gets funded. What you kind of can see through the data is then what often gets funding resources and attention and so on. So it's really essential that we increase investment in sex disaggregated data collection and build capacities of people to do that. So that kind of gives you like some of the thinking that's happening at this very high level, and where women in this space in the global community are how they're framing some of these issues. And of course, there's tons of details under all of these points, but I hope that gives you maybe some sense of inspiration and how we can talk about these issues and think about them in a slightly different way that hopefully will have a much greater impact on the well-being and lives of women and girls around the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for sharing that. And I want to thank all three of our distinguished speakers today, Jennifer, Claudine, Victoria. Truly, thank you for coming and sharing your ideas, your hopes for the future, your work, your research, and all of the resources and practical tips that you shared and that were shared by our audience in the chat mutually. It was so engaging reading through the chat. I'm excited and I'm fueled, as I think so many of us here who are passionate about equality in STEM we're all leaving this webinar ready to take action and do things. So thank you to all three of you. I would love to invite everyone here to join us for our upcoming NGCP webinar, Supporting Equitable Approaches to Early Science Education, next month. We'll pop that link in the chat. And if you enjoyed this webinar, consider supporting the work of the National Girls Collaborative. We'll put a link to that in the chat as well for anyone who's interested in supporting. And last but not least, I hope you'll take a couple of moments to take our post-webinar survey. We'll put that in the chat, and it will also pop up after I close this event. And that survey really helps guide the speakers we bring, the topics we explore, because we hope that it will be useful to everyone in our networks and everyone joining us. You'll all get a copy of the webinar recording, the slides, the chat transcript, so you'll have access to all of this. And thank you all once again for spending the morning, evening, afternoon. We had a billion different time zones here today. Thank you for whatever point in the day you joined us. Thank you for coming and joining this important conversation. And we hope to see you at the next NGCP event. Take care.